Hi guys, and welcome back to the IELTS course. In our today's lesson, we are going to learn about IELTS reading module. We are going to learn about different strategies and tips and how to complete successfully this part of the test. Before we'll start learning about IELTS reading strategies and tips, I would like to give you a brief overview about the IELTS reading section. In the IELTS exam, you'll have 3 long passages to read and 40 total questions to answer. You'll be given 60 minutes in total for this part of the test. There are 2 different types of IELTS, and the first one is academic IELTS. If you are taking this type of IELTS, academic IELTS, you will have different passages compared to the second part of the IELTS, which is a general training. Your passages are going to be about academic topics from general interest topics written by general audience. So for example, resources will be from journals, magazines, books, and newspapers. And if you are taking general training IELTS, your topics are going to be from basic social English training topics. And also general interest notices, flyers, timetables, documents, newspaper articles, instructions, and manuals. So these are type of resources you are going to have if you are taking general training passage. So remember, we have 3 passages, 40 questions in 60 minutes to complete this part of the test. Before we start reading about IELTS strategies, we are going to review question types you are going to have on the reading module. There are many types of questions used in the reading module, and you should be familiar with these types. For example, you'll have multiple choice questions, short answer questions, completing sentences, completing notes, summary, table, flowcharts, and the following list you see on the slide. You need to know how to approach all of them and know how to complete these tasks. However, you are not going to have all of them on your reading test. And now we are going to learn our first strategy, matching. In the IELTS exam, you'll be asked to match each definition or date in list A with a related term in list B. The main strategy here to remember is scan the reading passage, looking for the words, date, or phrases in list A. You need to read this sentence where this word or date is found, and ask yourself the following question: is a related term or phrase in the list B? If not, you need to read the sentence that comes before or after that. Remember, the word in list A may be in italics or may be capitalized. The matching word or phrase may be a paraphrase. So you have to make sure to understand the context and don't just match identical words. Remember, sometimes you may use a word from list B more than once. Alright guys, so now we have an example for our matching activity, our matching task. And here you need to read the paragraph, match each item in list A with an item in list B. So as you see, you're given 2 lists, list A, place name, and then 3 options, by, Castor, and Avon. So these are 3 names you have. And now you have also list B with different meanings. So we have A, B, C, D, E. So you need to find out, so this name, place name, by refers to which one, to A, B, or C. Some of them can be repeated too, so that's totally normal. So your task in this case to do is to go back to your passage, highlight the words beginning with by. Wherever you find the word by, so highlight it. And then if you see the word Castor, highlight it as well. And then if you see Avon, highlight it as well. And then go back and start reading these sentences. So if you read sentence that contains the word by, so let's see. It says, for example, the place name Derby comes from 2 old Viking words, deer and by, small rural settlement. So by, small rural settlement, do you see? So now go back to your list B and you see A, B, C, D, E, and we have D, which is a village. And small rural settlement, it's our village. So as I mentioned earlier, that sometimes you might not find exact same words, for example, in the passage, and it can be a paraphrase. So in this case, small rural settlement will be village, and then we found our word Castor. So if you start reading that sentence, Chester, another common place name, ending as a Saxon origin, and is also seen in the forms of sister and caster, and it doesn't really have any response, so I couldn't find it. I'm continuing reading. It refers to a place where Roman soldiers established their forts. So forts. And you see, we have fort. And that means our number 2 is going to be A, fort. And the last one is about Avon. So I found the word Avon. I highlighted that word and now I'm going to read it. The Avon River gets its name from the Celtic word that means just that river. So this one was easy. So that means Avon, it's river. So that's the name of the river. So, and that's how we do our matching activity. And I know this is just one paragraph, but the strategy is pretty much the same. So sometimes it can be 2 paragraphs and you are going to highlight the words and go back and read only these sentences. So you do not need to read the whole entire passage. You only need to read specific sentences in order to find your matching phrases. So that's what we have for the matching activity, guys. And now we are going to begin reviewing our next strategy about short answer. In the IELTS test, you'll be asked answer the questions below. You'll be asked write no more than 3 words for each answer and write your answers in boxes 1 and 3 on your answer sheet. First of all, you have to scan the passage looking for keywords found in the question. And you need to read how the question begins. For example, sometimes when the question begins with the words who, what, when, where, and how long, it can help you to determine what kind of information you need to look for in the passage. The most important things to remember: do not write more than the suggested number of words. If the directions say no more than 3 words, write only 3 words or less. Do not write 4 words. If you'll write 4 words, in this case, you'll be penalized. So keep that in mind and make sure you read carefully how many words you are allowed to write. And now let's take a look at our example about short answer questions. So in this case, IELTS exam is asking you to read the paragraphs and answer the questions. Also in the IELTS test, you are asked to write no more than 3 words for each answer. So make sure you read your question first before starting to read your paragraph or passage. So for example, if you take a look at question number 1, you have a question beginning with how long is a marathon race now? How long? It represents a number. So we'll be looking for a specific number. Number 2, what 2 places did Philippides run between? What 2 places is a specific name for places. And the last question we have, where were the Olympics held in 1908? And in this case, where is going to be a place. So similar to number 2. So when you have this type of question, you do not need to read the entire passage. All you have to do, read your questions first, then identify what kind of information you need to find, then go back to your passage and find specific information that represent number, place, or maybe location of specific information. But also make sure you pay attention to the words now, and for example in the question 3, 1908. IELTS Reading Module Part 2. Now we are going to review our true, false, and not given type of questions. A lot of times they are one of the most challenging type of questions for a lot of students, and students get confused while completing this type of task. When you have this type of task, true, false, and not given question, you will be given statement. The main thing you have to do during this task is to scan the passage for words that match the keywords in the statement. The statements may be a paraphrase of similar statements in the passage. And if there is no similar statements in the passage, your answer will be not given. The most important tip here to remember is to pay attention to adjectives and adverbs. We also call them modifiers. Also, it's very important to remember that modifier in a question may be the opposite of the modifier in the passage. When you have true, false, and not given type of task in the IELTS exam, you'll be asked the following question. Do the following statements agree with the information given in the passage? In boxes 1 through 4 on your answer sheet, write. So here we have important 3 points, and as you remember, you'll be given different statements. Sometimes you might have 5 statements, sometimes it can be 3, and it can vary depending on the task. So for example, when your statement agrees with the information in the passage, your answer will be true. If the statement contradicts with the information in the passage, your response will be false. And if you cannot find any information, just like on your statement, the response will be not given. So we have a paragraph in here and we have 3 different statements. So what we need to find out if these statements are true, false, or not given. So let's try to do at least one of them. And let's do number 4. So several of the volcanoes on the Hawaiian island are still active. So what you need to do in this case, go back to your passage. So you try to highlight or circle some words that have Hawaii or Hawaiian islands, and then start reading these sentences. I actually read this short paragraph and I couldn't find this information whatsoever. I saw some information about Hawaiian islands, but I haven't seen anything about active volcanoes. So that is why my number 4 is going to be not given. Next one I have, it's number 5. So number 5 states the following. There are a total of 8 islands in the Hawaiian island chain. So in this case, it states the following, total of 8 islands. So, and I found that information in the second sentence, so I'm starting to read. The chain consists of 8 major islands, the largest being the island of Hawaii, as well as some 120 smaller islands in the islets. Sorry. So that is going to be false because I see 8 and I see 8 islands in here too. However, in your statement, it says there are a total of 8 islands. However, if you go back to your second sentence, it says there are 8 major islands and plus 120 smaller islands. So that's why our number 5 is going to be false, because it's definitely more than 8. It's not a total 8 because we have 8 islands plus major 8 islands and plus small 124 islands. And the last one, the last statement we have is about Captain Cook. Let's see. Captain Cook names the islands after his financial backer. So in this case, you would have to find the name Captain Cook, and I see it here. So you are going to start reading. This was a name given to them by Captain Cook when he first visited the area in 1778. He calls them this in honor of the Earl of Sandwich, who had provided the financial backing for Cook's expeditions. So, and looks like this is a correct answer, so that's going to be true. So I hope that makes sense to you guys. So when you have this kind of task, true, false, not given, keep in mind you have different statements and you have to make sure to go back and read these your passage and identify similar information. So pay attention to your modifiers most importantly, because they can change a meaning completely. However, information can be very similar to what you see in your statement. Alright guys, so that's what we have for our true, false, and not given questions. Now we are going to review our yes, no, and not given types of questions. A lot of times students get confused when they respond to yes, no, and not given, and to true, false, and not given types of questions. They might look the same and they might have very similar directions. However, they're quite different. So for example, when you have yes, no, not given questions, you have different statements. And you have to identify, your task is to identify whether your statements agree or disagree with the opinion of the author. So you'll be reading the passage with the author's opinion. He might agree about a particular topic or he might disagree about it. So for example, when you have a statement, you read the statement, you go back to the passage, and you find the claim or you find the opinion where the author thinks the same, for example, then your answer will be yes. And if you have a statement and, for example, you go back to the passage and you find this for example, opinion or view by the author that has a totally different opinion, then your answer will be no. And for example, if it's impossible to say what the writer thinks about the statement you have, then your answer will be not given. So just make sure when you write down your answers in the answer sheet, you do not write true, false, and not given instead of yes, no, not given, because that might be counted as a wrong answer. So you have to be very careful when you complete your answer sheet. So here we have one passage, one paragraph and 3 different statements. Let's review at least one of them to have a better idea how to complete this type of task. So for example, our first statement states the reported number of traffic accident deaths caused by cell phone use is much lower than the actual number. So this actually statement is going to be false, because if you read your sentences 2, 3, and 4, that's where the information is. It actually reports completely different. It shows a different opinion about it. So author is actually doesn't think so. And now I'm going for you to read it for you so you'll have a better idea why. So here we have statistics from 2009 show close to 1,000 people in the United States killed in traffic accidents where use of cell phone was reported as a factor in the accident. So here, important sentence as well. Note that these numbers show only reported information. The number of traffic deaths caused by distracted drivers with cell phones is likely a good deal higher. So this is the opinion of the author. So he doesn't think so. He says that we need to know that this is only reported information and that the number of traffic deaths caused by distracted drivers actually is much higher than the reported number. And then what you have in your statement, it says that reported number of traffic accident deaths caused by cell phone use is much lower. So that is why our statement 1 is going to be false. So also, actually, I'm sorry guys, it's not a false, it's going to be no. So don't make the same mistake. It can be really confusing with a yes, no, and true and false. So when you'll be writing down your also answers, make sure you write no, yes, or not given, because if you're going to write down false, even though it's no, it's going to be a mistake. So I know I don't know why they make it so difficult, but that's how it is. So if you have yes, no, not given, so make sure you write down yes, no, not given, okay? And so here we have in our statement 1 is going to be no. So that will be our answer. And a very important point for you to remember when you're completing this type of task is to pay attention to your modifiers. So modifiers, for example, in our sentence, in our statement number 1 is reported number, much lower, actual. So these are very tricky words. So make sure you understand them very well. And then when you go back to your passage, you also circle modifiers, so that can help you stay very focused. Now we are going to have a recap about the most important things we studied during our today's lesson. As you remember, IELTS reading module consists of 3 passages. You will be given 60 minutes to complete all 3 of them and answer 40 questions. You won't have additional time to transfer your answers, so you have to make sure that you are writing down your answers in your answer sheet while reading your passages. Also remember, reading passages progress in difficulty. That means the first passage is the easiest and the last one is going to be the hardest. So spend your time wisely and leave what's difficult towards the end of your test. And also make sure that all parts of the answer agree with what is stated in the reading passage. That means when you have your statements and you go back to your passage and you are trying to find true, false, or not given type of questions, you have to make sure your statements, all of them, all parts of them, agree what's stated in the passage. And again, remember that successful IELTS reading test comprehension requires the ability to find question sentences within the text. Hi guys, and welcome back to our IELTS reading section of the test Today we will continue learning about various strategies and tips and how to pass IELTS exam successfully. Before we begin learning new strategies and tips and new task types, I would like to go back and review what we studied last time. Now we are going to have an overview to the previous lesson. As you guys remember, last time I mentioned that IELTS reading module had 3 long passages. You'll be given 60 minutes to complete all 3 of them. Also, you need to answer 40 different questions. So 40 questions in total. And you won't have additional time to transfer your answers. So you have to make sure you are using your 60 minutes wisely. Also remember that reading passages progress in a difficulty. You'll be asked to read and answer academic passages from different journals, magazines, books, and newspapers. And if you are completing general training, so you'll be reading topics from various resources such as flyers, notices, timetables, documents, newspaper, etc. Remember, there are many question types in the reading modules that you need to know how to answer before taking your test. So today we'll continue learning different task types and how to approach them during the test. And now we are going to review labeling a diagram type of task. In the IELTS exam, you'll be asked to label the diagram below, choose no more than 2 words from the reading passage for each answer, and write your answers in your answer sheet. Remember to read carefully your directions because sometimes you might be asked to write only 1 word, sometimes it can be 2 words or 3 words. So you have to make sure you know the exact amount you need to write down. The first thing you have to do when you're completing a particular task is to scan the text for keywords that indicate location. The words that indicate location sound like next to, above, across, beneath, and so on. We have so many different kinds of words that indicate location, so you have to make sure that you know them and you scan your passage to find them, to locate them. And another important thing to do when you're completing labeling diagram type of task is to look for words that indicate geometric patterns such as square, rectangle, etc. And remember, you don't need to write down your articles such as a, an, and the. And remember that they are also counted as words. If you write an apple, they will be counted as 2 words. Alright, remember the important tip as well, labeling diagram questions your ability to translate the words into pictures. When you read, turn your words into pictures in your head. You can also try to write a simple drawing on your handout or on your draft paper that will help you to understand the passage better and answer the questions correctly. So as you see here, we have a diagram where you have to fill out 2 parts. So you need to name 2 parts of this padlock, and also you need to read the passage. So you have a little paragraph in here, and you also have instructions for you to complete. So make sure you read them carefully because here it says you can write no more than 2 words. However, sometimes it can ask you to write 3 words or 1 word. So make sure you know exactly how many words you can write. And then after seeing your diagram, go back to your passage and try to read it. When you are reading, you also can draw, as I told you earlier, and then pay attention to words that have geometric patterns and also the words that indicate location. So these are very important points to remember. So find the words that indicate location. These words can be behind, next to, and also words that indicate geometric patterns. So these are like words bisect, or it can be triangle. So because they're describing different shapes. So keep in mind these tips, and that will help you to indicate, to find correct information. Now we are going to review our next task about completing sentences. In the IELTS exam, you'll be asked to complete the sentences and choose one word only from the passage for each answer. When you have a particular test, you have to try to complete the sentences first, read them carefully, and then go back to the passage and check your answer. Then you have to skim the passage looking for synonyms, paraphrases, or just the words that have the same meaning. Remember that the word that completes the sentence will be the same word in the passage, so you cannot write down the word you predict or you think will be correct in that case. It has to be exactly the same word you find in the passage. And the most important part to remember, that the grammatical form has to be the same. When you're completing a particular task, keep in mind that you have to make sure the word you write in the blank matches grammatically, because if it doesn't match grammatically, even the word itself is correct, but it's not correct grammatically. For example, you wrote subject instead of adjective, it will be counted as an incorrect answer. So here I would like you to take a look at our paragraph. And as you see, so we have directions that state the following. Read the paragraph, fill in each blank with one word only from the paragraph. So when you come to your test, please pay attention how many words you can write. And we have one paragraph and we have 3 sentences in here, as you see. So number 1, you have blank insomnia is a sleep disorder that lasts a short period of time. So focus on your keywords. So you have to fill out what kind of insomnia. Ask yourself a question, what kind of insomnia? And then is a sleep disorder that lasts a short period of time. So the most important keywords in here, short period of time, continuous. So some kind of insomnia, it's a sleep disorder and it continues very short time. So try to paraphrase the sentence and go back to your reading and start reading. So and try to find this information. So I'm trying to see. Okay, so here, for example, guys, we have acute insomnia lasts for just few days or weeks and is often brought on by traumatic events such as job loss or death of a loved one. So acute insomnia, do you see? So in this case, word acute, I'm going to highlight, and this is a word I need to write down in number 1. So acute insomnia is a sleep disorder that lasts a short period of time. So grammatically it sounds correct, and also I know this is a correct word because you see we have a paraphrase, last a short period of time, last just a few days or weeks. So this is a short period of time too. That's how I know that number 1, for number 1 we should pick a word acute. Alright guys, and the same way you are going to complete your number 2 and 3, so make sure you read your sentences carefully and then try to think of the words you have in different ways. So paraphrase different synonyms and go back to your text and find a paraphrase and synonyms and read very carefully and make sure that your words grammatically fit in the sentence. IELTS Reading Module Part 2. In the IELTS exam, you'll be asked to choose the correct heading for each section from the list of headings. There are more headings than sections, so you'll not use them all. The main strategy here to remember is that the heading is a paraphrase of the topic sentence of the paragraph. You need to skim to find the topic sentence, the one that gives the idea of the paragraph. Then you have to go back to your list of headings and choose one that is similar in meaning. Remember, the correct heading will probably be a paraphrase of the first or second sentence of the paragraph. So you need to cross out the headings as you use them. And now let's take a look at our list of headings type of task. When you're completing this type of task, you have to choose the correct heading for sections A through F from the list of headings below. So for example, as you see, we have list of headings and we have sections A through F or 1 through 5. In this case, sections represent different paragraphs you have in the passage. For example, section A is a paragraph 1, section B is a paragraph 2, etc. What you need to do while you're completing this type of task, you have to go back to section A, which is your paragraph 1, read the first and last sentences of the paragraph, and then go back to list of headings and find the headings that matches the same idea. A lot of times your first and last sentences of the paragraph contain the main idea or topic sentence. But if you still do not understand the first and the last paragraph of the sentences of the paragraph, make sure you read a couple of more sentences. But that's how you're supposed to complete list of headings kind of task, and you do not need to read the entire passages or paragraphs. All you have to do to make sure that your section A has the same idea, one of the ideas in the list of headings. And now I am going to review our strategy. Our final strategy for today's lesson is going to be about choosing answers from a list. The main strategy here to remember is to read the instructions carefully and scan the passage looking for the keywords in the direction line. Read carefully around the words in the passage. Scan the answer choice quickly and look for words in each statement. You have to make sure you match the keywords in the passage with the keywords in the statement you have. We had very similar examples to this one. And make sure you do not pay attention to pronouns. Look for nouns, verbs, and modifiers. The most important tip here to remember is that it is important to read the instructions carefully and pay attention to the keywords in the direction line. After you scan, choose the answers that you remember. Then go back and look for the other ones. Alright, so here we have our example about choosing answers from a list. When you are completing this type of task, you need to fill out the gaps you have about the summary of the importance of language. So you have 4 gaps. You need to go back to your list and you have a list of 7 words. So you have to pick the words that match in the context. Of course, it's going to be about the passage, and if you have a common understanding about the passage, so that will be easier for you to complete. However, also if you have very good knowledge of grammar, so you can easily guess what kind of word will be fitting in that context. But again, you have to make sure you have a common knowledge of your reading in order to complete the summary, the importance of language. And that's what you have to do while completing your choosing answers from a list type of task. And now we're going to review the most important strategies and tips that can help you to attain a high score. First of all, remember to examine all the words and phrases contained in the diagram or chart. Remember, by reading these words, you are helping yourself to understand the task better and find correct answers. Also, never read any text before looking at the related questions. Always use your titles, headings, underlined or highlighted words, and diagrams as part of your scanning process. Read first and last sentences in each paragraph to locate topic sentences, especially when you are completing your headings, list of headings type of task. And remember, learn to identify question types. Also remember that thinking about synonyms, paraphrases, and modal verbs can help you to locate correct information, especially when it comes to true, false, not given, or yes, no, and not given questions. Remember the time limit, 15 minutes per text should be your goal. Of course, your last text is going to be the most challenging, and you might want to save some time for your last passage especially. Do not spend too much time on your first passages and do what's easier first. And the last one, practice with a highlighter and pen before taking your test. Circling keywords, highlighting important words, it's a very important process in order to succeed during your reading part of the IELTS test. And now we're going to review our final slide of today's PowerPoint and the most important points we studied in our today's lesson. First of all, remember to read carefully how many words you are required to write. Secondly, you have to make sure to check the question to see if it asks for your own words or words from the text. And for summaries, you have to make sure you have a common understanding of the passage. Make sure you always read headings first and then the topic sentences. And it's very important to remember that you do not need to read the entire passage. Always make sure you understand what kind of task you have and then go back and complete your task. You don't have to completely read the entire passage sometimes. All you have to do to read first and last sentences of the paragraph or of the passage. Or sometimes it can be scanning for the specific words, keywords in the passage. So make sure you do not read the entire passage, but you understand what kind of task you have first. And again, in order to complete reading tasks successfully, you need to make sure you practice skills such as scanning, summarizing, paraphrasing, sequencing, and identifying parts of speech. And you have to make sure you practice a lot before you take your exam in order to feel confident and less nervous during the test. Hi guys, and welcome back to the IELTS reading course. In our today's lesson, we are going to review our final strategies and tips for the reading part of the test. And before we are going to begin learning about new strategies and tips, as usual, I would like to go back and review what we studied in our previous lesson. As you remember, reading module of the IELTS test has 3 passages to complete. You'll be asked to answer 40 questions in 60 minutes. You will also be asked to label a diagram, choose correct headings for each paragraph, and complete sentences with the correct word from the passage. And remember, in order to complete your reading task successfully, you need to practice scanning, summarizing, paraphrasing, sequencing, and identifying parts of speech. Our first strategy today that we're going to learn is about classifying information. In the IELTS exam, you'll be asked to classify the following facts as applying to, for example, you have 2 different things that you need to classify. For example, A is going to be about topic 1, for example, it's malart. And B, it's a topic 2, for example, is going to be about black dog. So you have to write the appropriate letter A or B in boxes 1 through 5 on your answer sheet. So I'm going to explain to you in our next slide and show you how exactly it's going to look like. But first, we're going to review some strategies. When you have classifying information type of task, you'll have to determine what characteristics distinguish one topic from the other. Next thing, you have to remember that you will classify the statements by what makes each item different from the other. You need to scan the passage quickly and circle the keywords or phrase in heading A and underline the word or phrase in heading B. Skim the characteristics, then scan the passage looking for characteristics that match the circled word and those that match the underlined word. I know it might be a little bit confusing right now, but once you see the following slide, it will be easier for you to understand. And anyways, let's review our tip in here. So the main important tip here to remember is that characteristics or ideas to be classified will be probably in the same paragraph as the word in the heading. And here you see you are given reading passage 1, and remember that normally the passage is going to be much longer than that. This is just an example. And you'll have 3 items, so A, B, C. So you have A between 1900s, 1979, B between 1980s and 1989s, and C between 1990s and the present. Then after that, you see you have 6 statements. So what do you have to do? You need to read each statement. For example, number 1 states, the valley was named Wadi al-Hitan. So what I would do in this case, I would go back to my passage and find years and also the name Wadi al-Hitan. So once I find it, I'll start reading the sentence. And when I'll read my sentences, I'll be able to identify the information when it happened. So if, for example, it was A or B, then next to 1, you are going to write down A. And then you read the next sentence, for example, next statement, the first whale thigh bone was knee joint was discovered. So here the most important keywords again, first, whale, thigh bone, and discovered. So I will go back to my passage, find the words about whale, first, or look for paraphrase and synonyms. then I will identify the years, and for example, maybe it's a C. Then if it's C, then I'm going to write down next to 2 number C, letter C. So, and that's how you're going to complete your classifying information type of task. And now we are going to review how to complete tables and flowcharts. In the IELTS exam, you'll be asked to complete the table using words from the passage. You would have to write your answer on your answer sheet. And remember, as in notes and summaries, you look for what is missing in the table or flowcharts. First, you have to look for the words that are given, then scan the passage to look for these words. Most of the time, the missing words will be near these words. Also, pay attention to synonyms and paraphrases. And the most important thing to remember in here is that you need to write only the number of words that are suggested in directions. Sometimes it can be only one word, and you have to be very careful. Also, make sure you are using correct grammatical form. If the word is correct, but grammatically is wrong, your answer will be marked as incorrect. So you have to be very careful and make sure that you feel confident using your parts of speech. Here we have an example about completing the table. So as you see, we have questions 9 through 13, and you need to complete the table below. IELTS exam is letting you write no more than 3 words. So remember, if you write 4 words, you'll be automatically penalized, and you cannot do that. So it can be only 1, 2, or 3 words. And let's take a look at the table we have. As you see, we have different categories in here. So for example, species, size, preferred climate, complementary species, start of active, period, and number of generations per year. So as you see, for the species, we have 3 different types: French, Spanish, South African bull roller, and we have different size. And as you see, French is already done for you, so your task is to complete about Spanish and South African bull roller. So for example, for Spanish, you already have a number, size, and you need to find out climate. And then you need to find out start of acting period of time. So period of time, when you see the word Spanish and you see period of time, maybe summer, winter, fall, so you are going to find such information. Number of generations per year, so it's going to be a number. For the African bull roller, so for example, you have to find out again climate and complementary species. So, and that's how you're going to complete your tables and flowcharts for this type of task. IELTS Reading Module Part 2. And now we are going to review our final strategy of the reading task, which is a multiple choice questions. In the IELTS exam, you'll be asked to choose the appropriate letter A through D and write in boxes 1 and 2 on your answer sheet. However, sometimes you can be asked a question and have only 3 options like A, B, and C. When you're completing a particular task, make sure to scan the reading passage looking for the words, dates, or phrases in the multiple choice options. Then you need to read the sentence where these keywords are found. Also make sure you ask yourself the following question: does the sentence answer the question? Remember that the keywords may be a synonym, antonym, or paraphrase of the correct answer. So you might find the answer, so you might not find exactly the same words in the passage, but it can be a paraphrase, in other words. Remember, you need to read the questions and try to guess the answer. So do not start looking for the answers without trying to answer them first. So make sure you read the question, then look at your options and try to pick one, and then go back to your passage and try to scan the passage for the keywords in the answer option. Always make sure you circle the keywords when you find them. And remember, the answers to the questions are in sequence. So it's not all over the paragraph, so you have to keep in mind the answers to the questions are in sequence, so it's easier to stay focused that way too. The answer to the first question is the first paragraph of the passage, in other words, and the answer to the second question follows that as well. And here we have an example about multiple choice questions, and we are given questions 10 through 12 where we have to choose the appropriate letters A, B, C, or D. Sometimes actually it can be only 3 options, A, B, C. All right, let's go ahead and review what we have. So for example, we have 2 statements and 1 question. And number 10 states the following: research completed in 1982 found that in the United soil erosion, and we have 4 options: A, reduce the productivity of farmland by 20%, B, was almost as severe as in India and China, C, was causing significant damage to 20% of farmland, and D, could be reduced by converting cultivated land to meadow or forest. So for example, when you are completing this type of task, it is important that you circle the keywords. And keywords we have in our statements are 1982, United States, soil erosion. So all the words are quite important, but the keywords probably will be 1982, United States. So when you're going back to your passage, you have to look for this, for these 2 words especially. And you also have different choices. So for example, in A, reduced the productivity farmland by 20%. You have to keep in mind that sometimes you're not going to be able to find exact the same words, so you have to look for synonyms. For example, when we have the word reduced, so you might find in the passage, in the text, something like decreased instead, synonym. And next one, for example, you have was almost as severe as in India and China. So here can be again another paraphrase, and you also have to pay attention to the words such as almost or often or significant. So these are type of words that are very important to pay attention to. So make sure before you start going back to your passage, you read your statements or questions carefully, circle the keywords, and then check your answers. For example, you see A, B, C, D, you have different statements, and think about the paraphrase. Sometimes you're not going to find exact the same words, but it's going to be paraphrase in the passage. And that's how you're going to complete your multiple choice type of questions. And now we are going to review our final strategies and tips for our today's lesson. Remember, in order to answer multiple choice questions, you need to highlight keywords and eliminate other answers. That will help you stay focused, and you'll have a better chances to get a correct answer. Also, to answer the question that asks you to classify information, you need to use a highlighter to identify the character of different categories in the text. Also, in order to complete tables, summaries, and flowcharts, make sure you do not use more than the number of words allowed for you to write. And remember that contractions are not used when word limits are given. And finally, make sure that you have a general understanding of the passage before you starting to complete your flowcharts and tables. We are going to review our final recap for the reading portion of the test. Remember, when you classify information, you need to determine what characteristics distinguish one item from another. Next, you have to identify 2 items that are being compared and mark them differently. For example, you can circle one of the items and you can underline the next one or the other one. And also make sure when you complete your summaries, they have to be grammatically correct. If they're incorrect grammatically, you'll be penalized for that. So keep that in mind and make sure that you feel confident with the parts of speech and practice in advance. Also remember, before completing multiple choice questions, you have to make sure to highlight the keywords because it can help you to stay focused and engaged. And the final thing we have to review, our final point, is to remember, before completing flowcharts and tables, make sure to read the words that are given in the graphics. And that's what we have for our reading strategies, guys. I hope it was very helpful for you and you learned a lot during our reading course. Hi guys, and welcome back to our IELTS reading course. And this is actually our last module for the reading course and our entire course. So we'll be reviewing general reading strategies and tips for the reading section. And here you'll learn some tips and tricks that I wasn't able to include in our previous modules. So I'll be explaining about that, and also I would like to share with you things you need to know before taking your test and what you need to do while taking your test. So I hope it's going to be very helpful for you, and let's get started. And now we are going to discuss about the important point that will help you to ace the IELTS reading module. Remember that you need to write your answers on the answer sheet. What it means is that you have to write down the answers on the answer sheet as you do the reading test, which means while you're reading your passages, you need to write down your answers to your answer sheet. Sometimes students think that they will have extra time to do so, just like in the listening portion of the test. However, you will not be given extra time to transfer your answers. So you have to use your time wisely and make sure while you are reading your passages, you are transferring your answers to your answer sheet. Another important point to keep in mind is that you do not need to read the reading passage first. It is a mistake to read the passage first without reading the questions. Also, some questions require you to find specific details in the passage without your knowledge of the entire content. So you don't need to know and read the entire content sometimes. When you see some questions, you automatically can go back and find specific words in the passage and locate some information that you need for answering some questions. Remember that some tasks only require you scan for specific information in the text, so do not begin reading the passages first. Reading text in logical order. So here we have the following sentence that gives a suggested order in which to look at the information in any of the three parts of the reading test. As you remember, our three parts of the test, it's our three passages. So our sentence here states the following: to have bright prospects, intelligently answer each question. So as you see on this page, we are going to discuss three words we have from this from the sentence. So to have bright, so T stands for title, H stands for heading, and B stands for bold printed words. So let's review each one separately. So for example, title. Title is very important. So this is a strategy you have to keep in mind, that reading title is very important because it can give you a rough idea about the main topic of the passage. Also, remember that if you do not understand the meaning of the title, it's totally fine, and just continue reading and until you start understanding what the idea of the passage or paragraph. Next one you have, it's a H. H stands for heading. So the headings for each section of the passage refer to what is contained in each section and where information can be located. So make sure you do not skip headings and you actually read them as well. They also help you to predict what the passage is about, so headings are very important. And the next point we have, it's a B. B, it stands for bold printed words, and they indicate that those words are they have some kind of importance. They can also help you to predict information contained in the passage. So just keep in mind, if you see the words in bold, they have some kind of importance. They would not be in bold if they would not be important. So make sure you are paying attention to these words. Our letter P stands for picture. As you remember, it is said that a picture is worth 1,000 words. It's a beautiful quote, but this is very true. Remember that you always need to look at illustrations, figures, tables, graphs, and diagrams that accompany a reading passage. They often summarize, add important detail, or make information in the passage clearer. For example, if you do not understand the passage and you look at the diagram or picture you have, that can help you to answer the question. So that's why do not ignore the pictures or diagrams or graphics presented. So make sure you study them very well too. Our letter I stands for instructions. So remember that the instructions contain important information as well, and you must read it. And if you do not read the instructions, you will almost certainly answer some of the questions in the wrong manner. The instruction may also contain clues about the information contained in the passage, so make sure you read your instructions, and especially some of them tell you how many words exactly you need to write down in your answer sheet. For example, sometimes it can be one word, sometimes two or three, so it depends on your task. And next letter we have, it's an A, so A stands for answers. So you have to keep that in mind. So what kind of answers do you need to give? So just think about that and ask yourself this question. The instructions will tell you. So we are going back to our letter I, which talks about instructions. I keep that in mind. And the kind of answers that are required also tell you more about the information within the passage. And ask yourself, is the answer a name, a date, or a number, etc.? So it depends on that. So what kind of information, what kind of answer you need to provide. Next point we have, next letter we have is an E. It stands for example. So the example not only provides you with the correct way to answer the questions, it also tells you in summarized form more about the passage itself. You are not wasting time by examining the example and the answer it gives. So a lot of times, for example, you don't understand the main idea and it has a lot of technical terms and you're not sure about the vocabulary. But if you read your example, you can actually understand better the main idea. So maybe if you don't understand the main idea or reason you have presented, so try to read the example. So examples, they always follow with transition words such as like for example, or it can be for instance. There are different ways to present it, but make sure you don't ignore them and you try to read them as well. And the last one we have, it's a letter Q, which stands for questions. So finally, the questions themselves provide valuable hints about the ideas contained in the passages, as well as specific information to look for on your first reading. So remember these letters, remember your sentence that I read for you previously, and that will help you to keep in mind these important points. IELTS Reading Strategies and Tips, Part 2. Today we are going to discuss how considering the passage layout is very important. Remember that in the reading test, the questions may come before or after the passages, and you need to know where each of the three sections of the reading test begins and ends, how many questions there are in that part of the test and where they also begin and end, and how long to spend on a group of questions and which questions to answer first. Remember, we have many types of IELTS reading question tasks, and some of them we reviewed in our previous lesson. As you remember, there are matching headings with paragraphs, short answer questions, identifying information with yes, no, true, false, or not given questions, and we have different notes, summary, table, flowchart, completion, matching phrases, identification of a writer's point of view, multiple choice questions, sentence completion, and classification. So we have different types of tasks, and knowing how to answer specific task is very crucial. So before taking your test, you have to make sure you understand the passage layout and how to approach each type of task. And now we are going to discuss one of the most common strategies in the reading, which is scanning the reading passage. We use this strategy all the time, at school, at work, at home, during different occasions. So remember, scanning is a method to use when you need to search a page quickly for information that you require. And when you complete your IELTS test, it's one of the most important strategies to know. And try to make sure that you practice to scan as much as possible, because during the reading test, as you remember, you'll be given 3 large passages to read, and you'll not have enough time to read them all carefully. So a lot of times you would have to scan your passages, go back to your questions, and then go back to your passage again and identify specific information and answer the question. Also, you can follow the tips below. So for example, you can skim the passage quickly for the general information. Then you can scan the passage for the specific information. As you remember, specific information is numbers, data, names, etc. Then you can sweep your eyes across the page slowly and smoothly. And it's a good idea to start at the top left and work your way across down the page. Do not read every word and do not rush. Also, guide your eyes with your finger or pen. I always try to use my pencil when I scan some passages, and when I find some specific information that I'm looking for, keywords, I always circle them. It helps me to go back and identify the answer. And occasionally stop for a moment to read something important and continue skimming back and forth. And now we're going to discuss how to read and identify the topic sentence first. A reading passage consists of a number of paragraphs, each of which has a main idea or topic that tells the reader more about the main topic of the passage. The topic sentence is usually, but not always, the first sentence of the paragraph. You can try to use the following order when you look for a topic sentence. First, you can check the first sentence, then the second sentence, and then the last sentence. And remember, if you didn't discover the topic sentence of the paragraph, you probably have to read the whole paragraph to find out what it is about. Remember that introduction has a main idea or topic of the entire passage, so pay close attention to your introduction and try to understand it. If the passage is an argument, it should state writer's opinion. Also, it's important to remember that conclusion often summarizes the main points of the passage and is often worth reading directly after looking at the introduction. And now we are going to review how to read around the keywords and phrases. Sometimes the answer to the question can be found without a detailed reading of a paragraph that might contain the answer. When you are completing multiple choice, true, false, and not given types of tasks, you need to choose a keyword or phrase from the question you have, then go back to your reading passage and try to locate the first example of it. Try to read the words around it and discover the answer. Read the sentence that the keyword or phrase is within, and if it's necessary, you also can read sentences before and after. That can help you to identify correct information. And if you cannot find the answer, continue looking for the next instance with the keywords. IELTS Reading Strategies and Tips, Part 3. Before you take your test, try to read as much as possible in English. You can read variety of topics from variety resources. For example, you can read some tourist information brochures, maybe some government reports, scientific research reports, which might not sound very exciting, but it can be very helpful for you. You can also read some health and safety brochures, newspapers, news, special interest magazines. So for example, if you are into fashion or you like learning more about the cars and engines or maybe sports, you can try to read such information in English. So try to read as much as possible, especially for the IELTS exam. It will be helpful for you if you read a little bit more about colleges and universities, some information about admission and how to pass certain tests. And another important point for you before taking your test is keeping a notebook of the words you learn. Try to write these words in a sentence and try to put these words into a paragraph. For example, learning words in context, not from a list. Don't be afraid to guess meanings as well. A lot of times when students try to guess the meaning, they are almost 80-90% are correct. So learn how to predict and how to guess. This is a very important skill to have. Also know that the types of questions found in the IELTS exam. So not knowing what kind of types of question you are going to have is going to be the biggest challenge for you to pass this test. And that's an important point for you to keep in mind before taking your test is knowing the type of information asked about on the IELTS. Know how to make predictions. So I mentioned that previously. So predicting, especially while you are listening or reading, this is a very important aspect of being successful. And again, know how to skim and scan the passages in order to look quickly for information. So skimming and scanning are the most important two strategies that can help you successfully pass your reading section. During the test, keep in mind that you need to read the title and any headings first, and you have to make sure you make predictions about the topic. Next, make sure you look over the questions quickly, make predictions about content and organization. After that, read the passages at a normal speed. Don't get stuck on parts or words you don't understand. When you answer the questions, don't spend too much time on the ones you don't feel sure about. Make a guess and go on. After you have answered all the questions, you can go back and check the ones you are not sure about. But don't spend more than 20 minutes on each passage. The last passage is longer and more complex than the first two, so remember that you need to save time for it. So probably that would be a good idea to spend 15 minutes for passage 1 and 2. So that will be 30 minutes in total, and the rest of your time you can spend for your final passage because that's going to be the most difficult one. Be sure to write your answers on the answer sheet before the 60 minutes are up. This is very important. You will not have extra time to transfer your answers. I mentioned that earlier, so keep in mind you have 60 minutes, and within the 60 minutes you have to read your passages and transfer your answers to your answer sheet. If the instructions ask you to use no more than 3 words to complete an answer, do not write more than 3 words. You will lose your points. And the final thing you have to keep in mind that you need to learn and understand true, false, not given, and yes, no, not given questions. A lot of times students get confused about them and they think they are the same, but as I explained to you earlier, they are very different and you have to make sure you know how to differentiate them. So, and actually they are the most difficult questions on the test, so make sure you practice so you can feel more confident when you are taking your test. And that's what we learned today, guys, and this is our final module for the reading. And you can go back and pause on some slides and review slowly, take notes, but I hope this was very helpful for you. And I know with a lot of practice and knowing how to approach each task, you are going to do a great job. I'm wishing you all the best luck, guys, and it was a pleasure of mine explaining to you how to pass the IELTS test. Thank you so much.